And that's the big concern to the opposition. As they mass their forces to go forward, they then become very vulnerable to air attack. We were there, a couple of days ago when that air attack came in, and it can work to quite, significant force. So they've got these concerns. Yesterday was a sandstorm, there was poor visibility, so the people were safe. Today is perfect visibility, and that threat remains from the air.
Tony, thousands of people turned out yesterday for Friday prayers in Benghazi, where you are. Of course, calling for Gaddafi to go. What's the atmosphere like now in Benghazi? What's been happening there today?
Well, it's very quiet at the moment. It all starts off very quiet here, and as the day moves on, you get thousands of people coming out here. Still this kind of carnival atmosphere surrounding everything, but also there's a steely determination of the people here. More guns are appearing, they're firing in the air. There's a different kind of idea now. People realize they're perhaps going to have to fight more than they thought for their liberation, but they are prepared to do it.
All right, Tony Birtley there in Benghazi. Tony, thank you very much indeed. Now, these are the latest pictures from Brega in the east of Libya. It's a key oil hub. Witnesses say at least 24 people were killed in clashes there on Friday, but the rebels say they are now in complete control of the city and the oil terminal. Well, further west in another oil town, that's Ras Lanuf, opposition fighters say all is quiet after they won control there on Friday. A doctor has reported that 8 people were killed and another 20 wounded in that fight. Videos of injured people have been posted on the internet. We can't independently verify those videos, but here's some of what they had to say.
We engaged carrying light weapons and a helicopter started shelling us from above. Still, victory will be ours.
We were being bombed by M21 long-range missiles, but I want to assure you that none of our guys backed down. 130 of Monwar's mercenaries were killed. When we drew up near them and their long-range weapons were no longer effective, they fled.
I would like to send a message from this hospital to all the Arab nations. There is no room in the mortuary for the bodies and no place to keep the victims of this vicious and murderous regime.
Well, the Obama administration is under increasing pressure to impose a no-fly zone over Libya, but so far it's ruled out getting involved in any military action. Well, earlier we spoke to Zbigniew Brzezinski, a former national security advisor to the Carter administration. He says the U.S. should play a more strategic role.
We are not destined, nor should we be, to act as the sole policeman of the world, whether it is in our interest or it is not. I think we have to judge each case on its merits. But in this particular case, I do think that some greater but indirect involvement would send the right message and move events in Libya in the right direction. I think the deployment of ships right off the shores of Tripoli would in itself send an important message. If it was tied also to the possible unilateral evacuation of Westerners, it would send a stronger message. And all of that would be an indication to the very uncertain and divided Libyan military that it is not in their interest to be supporting Gaddafi.
Zbigniew Brzezinski talking to us earlier. Now to Egypt, where several people have been injured after protesters fought with police in the country's second largest city, Alexandria. This amateur video is said to show protesters ransacking the headquarters of the state security agency. They say police were trying to destroy documents linked to past abuses. Witnesses say the security forces opened fire on the demonstrators. Egypt's former Interior Minister Habib El Adly has faced court pleading not guilty to charges of money laundering and profiteering. El Adly was arrested last month and is the first minister from the ousted government to face trial. He's also being investigated for ordering the shooting of protesters during the recent popular uprising. El Adly's been taken back to prison until the trial resumes on the 2nd of April. Now, more than 50 African Union peacekeepers have been killed in Somalia since the start of an offensive against al-Shabaab fighters 2 weeks ago, according to unnamed diplomats who spoke to the Associated Press news agency. Well, that number is far higher than the handful of deaths publicly acknowledged by the AU. The AU declined to comment on the new figures, but says it will issue a statement later on Saturday. 8,000 AU troops are stationed in Mogadishu, another 4,000... Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has condemned the killing of at least 6 female protesters in Côte d'Ivoire. They were taking part in a rally calling for President Laurent Gbagbo to accept November's election result and step down. Here's Imran Khan.
Dancing, singing, the message is clear. Gbagbo must go. It's a light-hearted demonstration. The women use leaves to symbolically brush away his regime. Then this. These pictures were taken on Thursday and could mark the turning point in the disputed elections of Côte d'Ivoire. 6 women were murdered. You can clearly see camouflaged vehicles drive through the crowd. The UN claimed that these were pro-government forces. That's denied by the Gbagbo loyalist army, who said that they were not operating here in Abobo. Many fear that more incidents like this could drag the country into civil war. Kofi Annan, the former UN Secretary General, says Gbagbo must step down.
The pressure is on, and I think if the population sustain their efforts, maintain the pressure for him to go, he eventually will have to go. Other leaders said they weren't going, but they are not around.
The situation has led to widespread panic. On Friday, many rushed to withdraw money from banks. Others are fearful that continued violence could lead to genocide, that thousands could die. Imran Khan, AlJazeera.
China's Premier Wen Jiabao has pledged to reduce inflation and corruption and raise income levels. He told the National People's Congress in Beijing the measures are necessary to maintain social stability. Here's our China correspondent, Melissa Chan.
It's a formal and serious affair, with officials from across the country, near and far, convening over the next 10 days. There's often a celebratory mood on the first day of Congress, with leaders looking back at the past year's economic accomplishments. But in the Great Hall of the People, China's premier used his opening speech as an opportunity for an honest assessment of what's going on in the country.
We are keenly aware that we still have a serious problem, and that our development is not yet balanced, coordinated, or sustainable.
The premier went on to discuss the threat of corruption, telling the people sitting before him that they, the officials, will be required to disclose their income, real estate, and investment details. He promised better social services to citizens.
We have not yet fundamentally solved a number of issues that the masses feel strongly about, namely the lack of high-quality educational and medical resources and their uneven distribution, increasing upward pressure on prices, and exorbitant housing price increases.
Real estate is indeed a tremendous problem for most Chinese. And on Saturday came the enormous pledge from the podium to eventually provide low-income housing for 20% of the country's urban households.
Every year, Premier Wen Jiabao takes the opportunity on the opening day of the National People's Congress to remind the people the government cares. But this year, more than the past, there are greater assurances from the government to improve things such as healthcare and education. It's a more worried government. Melissa Chan, AlJazeera, Beijing.
Well, Michael Pettis is an expert on Chinese economics and a professor of finance at Peking University. He explains that China needs to rethink its growth model if it wants to keep down inflation.
Much of what's being proposed in the new 5-year plan is